Hello, midlifers. Today's conversation with my friend Gini Holden is a bold and brilliant exploration of midlife as liberation. We talk about shedding old identities, hacking our nervous systems, and rediscovering creativity through poetry and purpose. Gini blends science and soul, champions community and connection, and reminds us what it means to be fully human. Join us now to share in Gini's midlife murmurings. Ginny, why don't you say hello and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Ginny. Chris is right. I spent most of my life in business, but I've had a strong academic background, and all I ever wanted to do was take the dusty science, because when we created it and did stuff and it was really useful, all it did was sit there in books on shelves, or it went, academic conferences. And having done psychology, business, and neuroscience, it was like, well, this stuff matters. Why aren't we taking it out there? So I switched and I left from doing a PhD and joined Procter & Gamble back in the day. So that's what I did, and took the dusty science out there and thought it'd actually be far more fun to try it in real life. And it was.
Very good. Thank you. I think you've got some good stories in this journey that you can share with us as part of our conversation this morning. But let's start with the first question. What does midlife mean for you, Ginny?
Well, I tell you what it used to mean. Because when you were young, you used to look at people our age and go, oh, they're really, really old and dusty and tired. And when you get there, it is right. I still feel like I did when I was sort of 20, 21. I might look slightly older. But it's a label I think other people give you. And it's a cultural thing that apparently you have to walk into and do things differently. And I've never been one for towing the line at the best of times. So I think midlife's really been done to me because a lot of people tend to think about you differently. So, for example, I took a package and left an organisation last August, and then having spent a little while trying to go, oh, I'll get another job. Apparently at my age, I'm far too old and have nothing to offer and know nothing about anything and couldn't sell for toffee. So one of the things I then did was set up my own business, but also started working with startups and founders, especially in the sales and marketing field. Founders and startups get told things. Number one, anyone can sell. So therefore, it's not a skill or an art or a science. And number two, marketing doesn't really matter. You just tell people you've got stuff and they come and want to buy from you. All of which we know is a complete waste of time. And they actually needed help and support. So that's where I've spent most of my time for the last year, culminating in launching 2 startups and some of my own stuff. So midlife is done to you. It doesn't feel like it's a choice I made.
How does it feel to be sitting in that place then of midlife done to you right now, given the kind of crescendo that you've reached in terms of your knowledge and experience and wisdom and energy and passion, and then midlife being done to you?
To be fair, most of life's been done to me. I'm a girl, and girls shouldn't work. Well, they definitely don't spend their whole life at work, because I'm closer to 60 than I am 50. And I've spent most of my life being the only woman in the room, especially the only woman in a room in technology. I'm not sure it's any different than any other place I've ever been in my life, because all I've done is I've arrived in some box someone else gave me and going, I don't want to fit in there and I'm not going to do it. So in that respect, it's no different to any other cultural box anyone's ever tried to put me in. Society, boys, the system. And I just go, yeah, well, no, that's not going to be happening, is it? I'm not going to conform to anything you expect me to do because I don't want to. And I never did.
I know early on in your career, you were responsible for something that was fairly market shaping and breaking and now lives in everybody's homes. Do you want to say a little bit about that?
That's really interesting, actually, because that was the person I wanted to get back to recently after we left, because I'd realised I put myself in a box far too much. But so as a rather young 25-year-old, I suddenly decided one day, and actually I was asked, I'd become brand director of a polythene organisation. And they were making loads of people redundant. And I was really annoyed with that, actually, because the reason we were making loads of people redundant, loads of factories were shutting, was because supermarkets wanted what we made, which was the plastic products, a lot cheaper, and specifically what was called vest carriers, because they look like a vest when you hang them up. And these are the bags you will find at till points, right? And they were free, believe it or not, and people put shopping in them. And then one day, I was up in Nelson in Lancashire, in one of those quintessential back streets you find up north. It didn't have cobbles on, but it may as well have done. And at the end of these row of terraced houses was a factory, and this was Nelson Plastics. And Nelson made really wonderful carrier bags with what was called a flexi loop over the top for people like Harrods, right? It was great. However, the powers that be had decided that we needed to shut all of these and move everything out to a place in China called Xingui. And I was up there that day having a look at what they did, because I had to put my proposals forward as well. And I remember leaving that day, and it was one of those dreary, horrible November days. It was already dark when I left. And I was sat in the car and I was driving back, and it was raining cats and dogs. And we got stuck on the Thelwell Viaduct, which is the bridge over the Manchester Ship Canal. And it was those days where you did have a phone, but it didn't do anything else but call people. And we were stuck. And the radio said we were going to be stuck for a very long while. So I was sitting there, and all I could think of was these poor gentlemen, because mostly men in this factory, who were probably my age, as I am now. And I was like,
Very
it
wise.
doesn't, yeah, it doesn't seem very fair. Right. It just wasn't fair. And it was treating people like numbers, not like individuals. And it was really annoying to me, actually, because being a Manchester girl, that's where I was born, I'd seen and heard about huge changes in Manchester as a commercial area, and thought, well, we're just cutting more, aren't we? There'll be nothing left. So right there and then I decided I needed to get people, you and me, to buy carrier bags. And believe it or not, we were stuck on the Thelwell Viaduct for nearly 3.5 hours. So during that 3.5 hours, there'd been a major crash. You know what it used to be like, and you were just stuck waiting. Between those 3.5 hours, I decided I was going to do that, and I'd worked out how to do it, because I went back to the science, because if you've got a number of programs in your head. So the first one we used, and actually I'll take you to the end of the till point now, is if you pick up something that's thick, it feels thick in your hands, your brain tells you it's strong. Because for most of the time your brain was being formed, thick equaled strong, right? No one sits on a thin branch on a tree, okay? We all choose the thick one. No one chooses the thin rope. If they're going to swing from that tree, we all choose the thick one. And because your brain automatically decides it. So we use that one. Then we used the way your brain works at the till point when you're talking to someone to make you make a choice. And this was, you were asked how many bag for life you actually wanted. Not did you, but how many. Of course, if you ask someone to make a choice between two numbers, they'll choose. Because you didn't say yes or no. That's a choice. You can go, yes, I want one, or no, I don't. So I said, how many do you want? 2 or 3? And people would just choose a number, because you're in that automatic behaviour mode. And then right at the beginning of the till point, and although this sounds very minor, it's actually one of the most important things we did. We were the first people to use the till separators and put a message on it. And what it said is bag for life 10p if it breaks free. And that has a very specific rhythm. Bag for life 10p if it breaks free. Because for most of human history, we've been oral beings. We literally only had stories to share. We never wrote anything down. And therefore, how your brain listens, it listens to rhythm. And there are very specific rhythms. And I forget what the name of that one is now. I'll remember it at probably 3 o'clock in the morning. But it's one of the original oral rhythms which was used. And I know your brain hears it. But what it will hear is the end of the line, which is 10p free. So you read, you get there, you read 10p free. Someone says, how many do you want? Your brain goes, it's free. I'll have 4. You go to the end and you actually put more shopping into the bags. So a couple of points, never asked you to buy a bag. I just told you what it was. We used how your brain's constructed through language to make a choice. And then because it was thicker and stronger, you put more in it. And we launched that in Milton Keynes and Bruce and Edmonds Waitrose, because Waitrose were the people who actually were more likely to want to buy something or not. And I mean, it all sounds like a nice little story, but one of the biggest impacts it had was on cost budgets for supermarkets, because they wanted to do it, Chris, because at that time, I'm trying to remember, I think it was £68 million a year was thrown down the drain because they were giving away free carrier bags. So we turned an on-cost into an on-cost, and an on-cost into an off-cost, and actually created a new category, and were good for the environment. Because I think within the first year, we saved more vest carriers than you could actually go to the sun and back with.
So tell me then about the motifs that were evident there that have then gone on to become major themes within the person you are today, Ginny.
I'm not sure I've ever been any different, Chris. I always wanted to say, number one, people matter, right? You're not a number on the balance sheet, and I've always hated that. And I've hated injustice my whole life. Just really drives me nuts. And I've always done something about it. My grandma used to tell a story about her picking me up from school. And I had a black eye, and the headmaster, this is primary school, and the headmaster's walking us out. And he's like terrified of my grandmother, who ran a very large translating agency and had to be called Dr. Eckstein. And he launches into this story about how I've been trying to get in between a fight. Someone was being bullied. And at 5, I even decided then it was wrong to bully someone. So people matter. If I don't stand up and do something about it, no one else is going to do it. I can't, no one's coming to rescue me. I'm the only adult in the room. I've got to do it. So you may as well just get on and do it. And then the other thing I think comes through on that one is that there are ways of doing things and interacting with people's brains and using the science in great positive ways. Most of the time, sometimes we see science as negative. But science, number one, never stays still. It always grows and changes. And I suppose that's another one. My daughter tells me I'm pathologically curious, as it is going to kill me one day, because it doesn't matter what it is. If I don't know anything about it, I'm interested. And that could be anything. I just go, oh, that's really interesting. I don't know. And then the more I know, the more I find out I have no idea about anything at all.
And you talked about, when I sort of brought you back to that early discovery,
Yes.
you mentioned that midlife is a little bit like coming back to the person you were there. As we've been
Yes.
thinking about midlife over the last few interviews, a recurrent theme is, for many, midlife is about shedding the clothes that don't fit anymore and getting ready to run the next stage of life. And I'm interested, are there clothes that you've been putting on through your 20s, 30s, 40s that now, as you come to midlife and you kind of go back to that place of Ginny at 25, that you can sort of identify and go, I'm shedding those now?
I think this is a really interesting one, because I'm not sure I had any then that I didn't want to have. And then shortly after that, my first husband died. Not that I go around collecting them, you understand. I'm only on number 2. And I took a very specific decision, which was I wasn't going to trust anyone else to look after us. So, Rachel was 6 months old at the time, and I went straight back to work, and I stayed there. But what I had found is that there were certain boxes I had to fit into, whether I liked it or not. Because I had to drop the word doctor, because I was told no one would employ me as a salesperson or in sales and marketing. If I was a girl, I was short. I was told I was pretty, and you can't use doctor. You're just far too scary. So stop it. Literally stop it. And LinkedIn didn't exist then. This is the 90s. So yeah, I just dropped it, and I never really used it ever again. I use it now and again recently. It's just very funny. I still get the same response. What? It works better if I put my glasses on. And people go, "Oh, yes, you can be a doctor now because you look like one." Um, but so I stopped all of those things. And I think sometimes having walked out of bits of yourself, walking back into them is really difficult because you forget what they were and how they worked. So for me, it's not as though I've shedded things in my 20s because I've never really been culturally very good at fitting in, Chris. Okay. I get the rules, I play the rules, but I mean, yeah, I mean, I've had short hair. It's probably been this short since I was 14. And again, that didn't go down very well. You're supposed to have long hair as a girl. It's like, no, I'm not doing that. And I'm not wearing a dress. And that reminds me, when I first got to Procter& and Gamble, I was told I had to wear a skirt. And I couldn't wear trousers, so I wore long shorts. She said it didn't say I couldn't wear long shorts in the rules. So, but it's been, yeah, I've always been a pain in the ass to manage. In fact, I'm still my first boss, who I'm still very great friends with, always said, "I knew you were a problem," because they made us do personality tests when we arrived. And I said to him, "I'll do it." And it was sort of personality test, which said, "You'll be like this or you'll be like that. And this is how you work at work." And I did it. And I said, "It's a complete waste of time, John." I said, "We disproved any of this stuff exists in my first term at university." And so I think what I got back was being allowed to be irreverent again. Well, the system says irreverent. And going, right, no, it's not done like that. And I'm not going to just agree for the sake of agreeing. So since my daughter became mostly economically viable unit in her own right, I guess sort of gave myself permission to go, right, you can step outside all of this now. But it was really hard because I'd forgotten some of it, I'd forgotten how to. Because having acquiesced to other people's ways of doing things, even if I was quietly subversive, it was difficult. And it's taken me 3 years, I think, to go back to, yeah, no, not doing that anymore. Not going to fall in the box. Not going to agree with you for the sake of agreeing. Not going to go, I will give you what you want to see just so I can sell you something either. Not that I was ever very good at that. I'd rather walk away from a sale than sell something that wasn't right for them. And I would tell them, no, no, go and see this company over here. It's far better for you than talking to me. Okay. And this is the person you need to speak to. So it's not so much it's been more of, I've found it challenging to go back to that person that I knew was there anyway. It's not that I'd rediscovered her. She was always like Marmite, someone calls me. One of my buddies says, Marmite really like you. Oh, you just drive people nuts, Ginny. Fine, I'll drive you nuts.
It sounds like a very powerful time for you now, where you stepped into that power and that you're authentic Ginny as you turn up, and that inner sense of right, yes and no, as you called it, gets voice. And I'm really interested in how you've seen different people react to that who maybe knew you as previous Ginny as well.
Well, yeah, no, interesting. I would have said there's only one person I know who's known me throughout my life, and that's was the girl I sat next to on my very first day of secondary school. And she just says, "You've never been any different." Okay. But then I never worked with Nikki. So I think when we work, we do put on clothes and we do act to fit into things. However, I mean, I'm not even sure I did that very well. So what have become more like? I think it's more of remembering there's also a certain type of power in saying no. Because walking into businesses every day, and when the boss says today red is pink, and everyone, even though they know red is not pink, behaves that way because that's the boss and whoever they are, their God, I'd still go, no, it's not, it's pink. But I do it and then worry about it. Now stop worrying about it.
Look, tell me, all this experience you've had, this Ginny that's run through all these chapters and this midlife power, how are you channeling that now? Tell me a little bit about the things you've created and started and how they reflect you and your passions.
So number one, I said I take the science of sales and marketing. So this is really interesting dichotomy. There's a lot of stuff out there which is management consulting speak, right? We've done this way for 40 or 50 years, and it's all rubbish because none of it's based in science. Let's take change management programs for a start. Every single change management program out there has no science in it whatsoever at all. What it basically says is you can make people don't want to change. That's wrong for a start. And therefore and if they feel like they can change, they will change. They just dressed up in different theories. And that takes absolutely no notice of any of the neuroscience about how your brain builds new behaviors. As I said, Bag for Life shows you can make people do anything. You don't even have to ask them to do it. You put stuff in their environment and they change. And it's exactly the same with sales and marketing. Sales and marketing isn't about asking someone to buy something. It's understanding how they make a decision and how people make buying decisions about risk value payoff. And how they do that risk value payoff depends on how they view risk, number one. Everyone has a default risk setting. And number two, what something actually does for them. And these are the things I've been taking into Found's world. So, for example, no one buys shampoo. Everyone buys clean hair. But why is clean hair important? And why does everyone want clean hair? Well, because we live in a society that tells us you won't fit in if your hair smells or it's dirty. You're an outcast. So actually, you're buying good value attachment. You're not even buying clean hair. You are conforming to a value that sits in society. And then they do something really interesting. They go, oh, and you're unique because your hair is curly and dry. So we're now going to make you spend more money because we've told you feel unique. And interestingly, that's also something which is hardwired into culture, which is in the last couple of 100 years, we've championed the individual over society, or groups of people, which I think is fundamentally wrong. Okay. But we have done. And anything that makes you feel that you're in control and you're an individual, you've been taught from being quite small, is more important than being part of the group. So even as simple as buying shampoo is actually part of your decision-making makeup because you're a cultural being in a particular society at a particular time. And that's shampoo, right?
The other day I saw it because we dropped Zamira off at university and we had to do her initial supermarket shop. We had a long list of things she wanted while she unpacked the room. Makeup remover was one of them. Not only is it called micellar water, but also it's for dull skin. And I read this and I was thinking, wow, you are absolutely playing on this is really clever and intelligent and scientific, makeup remover, and you've got dull skin. Do you don't want to be doing that? And I thought, I don't like this.
No, totally. Well, I don't. I mean, I understand how they work. And this is what I found really funny. So when you go and work with founders and you go and work with people who've got products, they never understand. In fact, most people don't get what the value is someone else is buying. And not only is it all of that, that then ties up to an emotional piece as well. So people buy emotionally, full stop. So if you make someone feel like they want something, they'll justify buying it. And that doesn't matter if it's the largest ERP system in the world going or shampoo. The brain is emotional first. This is how human beings are constructed. So I take all of that bit and go in and work with founders on the level of, right, let's actually really understand what it is someone's buying here when they buy this. And if you've got a decision-making unit, there's more than one person in the then every single person you have to understand in that one as well. This is why it's really fun, sales. It's great fun. And when you're speaking one-to-one, there's another set of skills you use to be able to take and manage and control that conversation. Because marketing is about hacking someone's decision-making process when you're not in the room with them. Sales is about how you actively hack someone's neuro decision-making process when you're with them. So like one of the Bag for Life examples, one of the easiest closes, and you and I both know this, you've been in sales, is you don't ask someone, do you want to buy? Do you say, right, do you want delivery next month or the month after? They have to make a choice. So it's also then how you use words. And I found those hugely missing in Found World because so many VCs and In fact, I've now been doing this on and off for about 10 years because I've helped people, and I still don't understand why anyone who gives someone else money goes, that bit over there, selling it, don't worry about it, it's really easy. Why no one wants to accept that human beings make decisions in certain ways, I have no idea, Chris, because it does a huge disservice to businesses, and it does a huge disservice to anyone who works in sales and marketing. So that's on one side. But the other side with the science is, if you want to change anything about your own brain, can we really use proper science, right? So we've built something around how you can change your own behaviours. Because I wanted to change some of mine recently, which you've heard. I wanted to be able to get back to me. And if I'd practiced being someone else for so long, my brain was thinking it was normal. So I can't just think, I'm going to grow new behavior in neurons. Doesn't work like that. It always makes me laugh because people, everything. And I have evaluated so many of the things which are around. They say they use neuroscience when actually, if you break it down, they use behaviourist psychology that went out 60 years ago. And the other ones say, if you think hard enough, you can change how you think. It's rubbish. That's like saying, I've bought a gym membership. I'm now fit. Doesn't work. Your brain doesn't work like that. So we created something, and I can easily tell you there are 7 pillars you need to change anything properly. Because you need to release the right neurotransmitters, and different neurotransmitters help you build brain connections in different ways. You need to tell your brain how to get better at risking, because most people's risk quotients are very, very low because how society has made them think. So as soon as they step out and doing something different, their brain goes, your risk quotient is like here, instead of what human beings are, is probably here or over there, and it stops you. Because it goes, no, that's risky, please don't do that. It doesn't then put you in a place where you rewire behaviors by practicing them. And one of the great things about the human brain, it doesn't know the difference between play and real life. That you have the right nutrition, because if there ain't enough protein around, the brain goes, no! Because when it was built, there wasn't lots of protein. So the immediately thing it assesses to grow a new neuron is there any protein? Am I getting enough? And if there isn't, it also stops you. Then you have to manage your sleep in a very specific way, because neurons don't grow when you're awake. What a surprise. So if you don't manage your sleep in a specific way, and then there's 2 others which are very important. One is it must be done in a group. People who want to do similar things to you. Because the brain has a hardwired setting which says, if everyone else around me isn't changing, I'm not doing it. Because we're groups, and we transformed and evolved as groups of people. And you see this every single time. If you decide you want to do something different, say I suddenly decided, I don't know, I wanted to run a marathon. And I tell everyone I'm going to train to run a marathon. So many people will go, why are you doing that then? In other words, why? And people start to question why they're doing it. And actually what they're not saying to you is, why are you doing it? They're saying, why should I? But it stops people all the time because they want to stay, your brain wants to stay part of the group. It wants to stay recognized and supported and secure. And then the last one is you have to realize how long you're going to have to do those things to rewire something, to create new behavior. And that's a case of understanding what level it was wired in, how old you were, and actually, are you trying to change something you culturally learned in this lifetime, which you can change, or something that's actually an evolutionary program, which is showing up as a specific way. And those you can only learn to live with, feel, and still do. But if you don't know which one of those it is, you can't change it. So we came up with ways of doing that. And they're not hard and they're not complicated, because all you do is hack your own nervous system. And anyone can hack their own nervous system, because you can breathe, you move, you see, you feel. Immediately you're into your nervous system. And what you've just got to do is understand how those act within your nervous system and then what to do with them. So we have something called neuro-tempering. And it does that whole thing if you want to do it. But on the other side, you can just hack how people think and sell more. They're the same thing.
How are you packaging that up and taking it out to the world? Because it sounds really important work.
Well, number one, I always thought it was about liberation because it's about allowing people to step out of the things they've been told they should be. So we've got three things, Chris. And this sounds like a sales pitch, and it's not. It's if you just want to biohack how to do something, hack your nervous system, there's a whole sales thing. And this is whether you're in business, you don't have to be a salesperson. The second one is how do you do it to increase performance? So reduce stress, increase energy, and increase resilience, which are specifically all about your nervous system, because those are the things that get in your way. So number one, it's pseudo selling, I suppose. It is selling, but anyone can do it. Number two, it's the how do I feel less stressed, more resilient, and have more energy. And then the third one is if you want to come and learn the tools to build new neurons in your brain, we've managed to reduce it down to a day and a half where you come and physically do the programmer. So you go away with a set of tools, which you can use wherever you are to do whatever you want to. So that's really what we're doing. But in the end, I suppose one of my biggest challenges of packaging it all up is I'd love to give it away free because I just care. I was like, just keep, and it's like, yeah, no, Jenny, you've got, according to my bank account, I need to earn some money. But if I had my choice, I'd just give it away free and go. But then that's an interesting one as well, because the way people's brains work in the societies we live in, something free has no value. Therefore, it can't be any good. And apparently, the more I pay for something, the more value it has, because it's got to be, because it's expensive. All of us are programmed that way.
But I was really excited when you mentioned the word liberation. Your face lit up and the energy kind of stepped up, thinking about, well, actually, this is not a set of sciencey tools that you're going to walk away with. This is liberation to become the person that you're meant to be. And as I think about midlife and some of the changes that some of the people listening to this will be thinking about, whether I leave this corporate nest, whether I change my relationship landscape, whether I take on new responsibilities in the community, whether I retire, whether I take this investment choice. There's some big decisions out there for people to make. And I'm interested in how the 7 dimensions come to play for a midlifer. If I'm someone sitting in a corporate role thinking, do I leave the corporate nest to go and do this thing that I've always wanted to do? How would some of those things apply to a person like that?
Well, in the end, you have to start to understand why you're finding that hard. So just to throw two things out there. One, it's a risk. Brain hates risk. And it's not so much it hates risk, it hates unpredictability. Because the brain has three major executive functions. And one of them is to predict the environment to keep you safe. So as soon as you start to think about something it can't predict, it gets really worried. I mean, and people go, really? But this is why people stay in abusive relationships, right? Because it's easier. The brain would rather have you stay somewhere which is it can predict, even if that prediction is awful, than go to somewhere it can't predict. And it's not about emotion. It's about your brain's executive function on predictability. So one of the first challenges is, right, you've got to get more comfortable with risk. And that was the second one we looked at in the 7 steps. Is it's a risk. The brain doesn't like risk. And the thing is, people always think, oh, I'm in control of everything and it's all logical. God, sod it, don't be stupid. You have no idea what your brain's doing 99.9% of the time. It doesn't want you to know. And the 1% we think is ours is literally the overlay over the top that the brain needed to check the environment all the time to keep you safe for prediction. So immediately you go to change what you're really comfortable with, or the brain can predict, and you feel comfortable with it, shoves into, no, you can't do that. And the other thing about the predictive function of the brain, which is really important, is that there's no good outcome for that prediction. The brain's only three defaults are fight, flight, freeze. They're all negative. So as soon as you think about changing a situation which the brain can't predict, it doesn't even predict good things for you. And this is one of the things that talks to me about mindset thinking and people who say you can think differently. There are three default settings for the brain on predictability, and they're all awful. You can't change that. You can mitigate it and know it's making you feel like that, but you can't change it. So that's number one. And you have to learn to be more comfortable in situations. And there are relatively easy, unscary ways to teach you that. First, you start thinking about doing something different. Your brain has a complete fix. It's unpredictable, and we understand why now. The second thing it does is it really impacts something about how you feel about the value of who you are. Now, what we have to understand hugely is human beings have worked together as groups for probably 8 million years or north of, or your brain has, right? Homo sapiens is slightly quite new, but our brain, this bit is dead old. One of the things we worked out as hominoid groups is that if we stayed together as a group, we survived better. So there's a default, and it's proved time and time again in very complicated mathematical ways. And if anyone's bored, give me a call and we'll discuss it, that you need to have an attachment to a group. So you will actually put the group first and your own self second. And I know that sounds really weird because we've been told for a very long time now that's wrong, and human beings are all selfish, and it's rubbish. It's something we hold for societal control. Because imagine the power we had if we all worked together. But so when it comes down to value, you feel, again, your brain goes to this place. If I can't predict my value to this group, I am going to be thrown out and I'll be dead because I need the rest of the group to survive. And the thing is, that group can be a family. And, you know, one of the biggest challenges is in midlife is our values within our system, familial systems change. Children leave. If you've been lucky enough to be able to, as a woman, stay at home and look after the family, all of a sudden you're going to go, what's my value? It's gone. If you've been mostly, and especially people our age, do the boy stuff and I'm a provider, well, who am I providing for? Right? Or how does that provide change? And how do I think about myself differently in those roles? But both of those things are predicated on how the brain is structured, how it works, why it works that way, and being human. And the other two things to realize are the body we live in today really wasn't meant to be this old. You know, it was designed, and people go, "Oh, well, people 1,000 years ago lived till they were 75. It's 8 million years old, guys. Most of us were dead by the time we were 35. Can I just put that out there? That's 1,000 years you have to look at. It's the whole stretch. And certain things stopped working because we really weren't programmed to live this long. So hormones drop off for you as a woman. As once you start to get, you've one of the ways you've done is fulfill what your body was meant to do, which is perhaps, help the next generations carry on. Again, that has a huge impact on who you are and how you think, because the three main hormones in the body, progesterone, testosterone, and estrogen, affect every single system in your body. You will feel differently. Whatever you choose to do about that is up to you. I'm just saying every single cell in your body is affected by the loss of those three things. And let's not forget boys here. Testosterone starts to drop off from the age of 35, right? In fact, I recommend anyone our age goes and gets a full blood workup, not the ones the NHS give you. That's unfortunately slightly mediocre. If you've got the money, please go and do it, because you have to understand what it is. Because if you can do both of those things, you can actually be hugely functional as you are now, or probably let's say early 40s, because you can replace it all, you can maintain your body in the same state till you're 75 plus. And there's really good science on that, right? Really good science, which says that exercise, weight training, movement, challenging your brain, you don't have to accept a decline ever. And understanding who you are and what the body is and what the body does, and standing outside that societal thing which says, you're old, slow down, stop being, yeah, rubbish.
Yeah. I was inspired by your sixth, one of your 7 points around
Yeah.
community and the power of community.
Yes.
And as we were creating this midlife murmurings, the image that really inspired us was the murmuration of the starlings coming together, individual starling by individual starling, into something beautiful. And that was really the hope for the podcast, was that we capture some of that wisdom and create a community around some of those thoughts and experiences that people have had. Thinking about your comment on value too, that if your value is with the group of people that you are currently working with, for example,
Yes.
and there's uncertainty the other side of that, how important would it be for people to find a community of others who are also exploring, making those sort of radical changes, and that's not something that we naturally find or belong to.
Okay. I would have said, yes, we are natural community based organism. We've been told we're not. Okay. We also live in a world that, well, we're over here for a start, like this. Your brain don't work like that. It needs to see people. It needs to be in the same space as people. Most of how the brain works with other people is completely unconscious and non-verbal. Physically being with a group of people and a community, and usually communities for me are balanced. You go from babies all the way up to older people, whatever age. That's a balanced community. That is a structural balanced community, because that's what we always were. And it's literally only in the past 150 years, through the rise of the Industrial Revolution, that has smashed that apart. And the fact that you and I can be evolutionary survival units in our own right. If you look at the whole gamut of human existence, this is like the last 10 seconds. Just because we can doesn't mean we should. And the thing is, if someone makes you do that and says that to you and you will listen to it, we forget in our lifetimes that it's not about that. It's about who we are and how we work together as communities. So for me, I grew up in a little village. Well, okay, initially Manchester, but from the age of 9, I moved to the middle of South Warwickshire. We were 14 minutes away from the nearest town, in quite a large village. And looking back on it, that whole village functioned as a community. I mean, at that stage, there was only probably a couple of thousand people who lived there. And actually, your ideal group size is around 70. But everyone knew everyone else. And I remember, Chris, one day I'd was driving tractors for harvest, taking grain from the field to the grain dryers. And, we finished about 3:30 in the morning. And I was, and my bike, my push bike, because I was only 14, got a puncture on the way home. And it was about 3 or 4 miles. I know where I am. I'll just walk. Didn't even think about it. Walking home. And the milkman drove past me and he stopped there and he reversed back and he said, "In the back, Ginny, with your bike, because your dad will kill me if if you walk down this road home, because he knows this is my route." So literally, I was just then driven home. I think that's a really interesting example because it shows that it wasn't just for me, but he also mentioned my dad and he mentioned what my dad would say to him because everyone knew what everyone else did. And there's nothing wrong with everyone knowing what everyone else does because the things that we've read in books, and these are all novels, aren't indicative of human society. So if something like The Lord of the Flies has been categorically proven not to be right, people don't behave like that. So one of the things I suppose I get annoyed about, Chris, is a lot of the stories we're told, and remember the brain hardwired to listen to a story. are done for control purposes to keep us from being in groups. And if you want to go out and find a group, you go and do it. If you just sit with people your own age, it's okay. And it does work. But you actually, for me, I'd always argue for a balanced group, right? You know, where all ages are represented and all things happen. But any group is better than no group at all.
Yeah. So I've got lots of ideas firing in my brain as you talk about that, Ginny. Thank you. Um, Tell me, you touched on men in your last thing. I know in your past you've also created a men's charity, and I'm curious what that taught you or showed you about mental health in men in midlife. Are you happy to talk about that?
Yeah, of course. So I told you I lost my first husband who committed suicide. Well, one of the reasons I think Ian did it, well, there were loads of reasons, but however, what I wanted was to make sure no one else had to walk the paths I had when I was that age, and I was, 29. So, and this literally came from, so I was having my hair cut, right? And I've got short hair, as you can see, and barbers cut short hair better. So I sat there and this chap was cutting my hair, a gentleman called Tom Chapman, and he was telling me about he wanted to set up a charity because two of his friends had committed suicide. And he said, I think it's because I didn't cut their hair, because I see people all the time. Men will come into my shop, maybe even once a week, and I know when something's wrong and I'll talk to them. And I said, okay, keep telling me. And actually, what was really interesting about that dynamic is because a barber will touch you places where normally someone wouldn't touch you, Chris, not as a bloke. It changes the dynamic and you feel relaxed in a way you wouldn't do normally. So you're more likely to talk. So he put together a program. We got it certified by the British College of Psychiatrists. And it's called the Lions Barber Collective. Over time, it's now converted into a business because it's so hard to run a charity. Can I just say that? It's harder doing the paperwork to run a charity than it is actually doing something that makes a difference. But it still goes today. Tom goes, when the whole of the team will go to places which are really strong male spaces and cut hair and talk to people. And there's a whole set of training people can train in, which basically allows you to talk. Now, it's not Samaritans. It's not, I'll hold your hand at the end. This is how to stop someone, how to talk to them, and then how to signpost them to services that can take them on a journey. But for me, again, I suppose that came back to the science, Chris. I know why that space works, right? I know what psychologically you're doing to someone's brain when they're interacting with you on that level. So yes, it's a really good idea. Yes, it works. And, I suppose we're still back there again, aren't we? I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to make sure, if I possibly could, that it changed something.
And
And
how many men do you think it has made a difference for now?
Well, we've been running for over 10 years. And the training's gone global. So I don't know. I've never really added it up. It's just something I did.
And taking your science lens on it, why do you think mental health in men is such a challenge for guys? What's going on for them?
Well, community number one, right? Women. So if you haven't got connected human communities, a lot of value's lost. You will only ever see your value as a provider, right? And you will never see your value as anything else. Connected communities, and and there is loads of work on this. It just happens to be from the 1800s and 1800s and very early 20th century. And they're not communities which we'd think, so they're not Western. You could go indigenous population, but they functioned in an entirely different way. And they're the closest thing we've still got to what human society must have been. And the community there, everyone had a role, but everyone was cared for and looked after. So it's a bit like your role would never have just been in a box. Like, we've put women's roles in boxes today, we've put men's roles in boxes. And I think two things happened. One, if you're put in a box, how you think about yourself is only in that box. And getting out of that box, as we discussed previously, because of risk and value, is really hard. Secondly, if you've only stayed in that box and you've only interacted with people where that box is what your value is, you never get to talk about stuff in a different way. So you never get to be able to have conversations outside that box. So we have a nuclear family today. Probably the only woman most men have talked to most of their life is their wives and daughters, if they have them, because at work it tends to be very male dominated. Still it does, right? So being able to have those conversations in a space which isn't what I do for a living and therefore how I have to behave here, you can't ever really have a real conversation. As in one which doesn't depend on the fact I'm here because I need to earn money and you're my competition, right? Not I'm here just to have a chat. And one of the things I always think is really indicative about this is when boys first get together and meet each other, they do something really interesting. Is they keep swapping information till they find something they both like or do. You know, it starts with sport. You can hear them, and then they go, "Oh, I'm like you, and you're like me, and this is where we belong." And the thing is, what we've done is disenfranchised men out of communities till there's nowhere for them to belong. So no wonder they don't feel that they can act or behave in certain ways. The other thing I think happens is we've all been socialized in nuclear families. And as in with only two parents and maybe a set of grandparents and maybe sometimes in a wider community. But the most important thing is the two people who brought you up, you know, your mum and dad, maybe grandparents. Again, that's not particularly human. We used to grow up as part of large communities. So the impacts on you when you were little came from to 70 people, not 6. So if there wasn't something you felt comfortable, your brain didn't feel comfortable with, there were 70 different ways of being, at least, not 6, and not prescribed. And all our prescribed ways of being, and especially for blokes, I think are very, very limiting because they say, you go out, you're competitive, you're a provider, end of. And all that does is perpetuate the system where there's one person at the top or one person that makes a decision, holds trust, power, and truth, and pushes it down on everyone else. And again, it's not very human. So it might be slightly different perspective, but
In our local community, we've got a thriving men's shed. And there's 1,000 of those around the country now. And it is a place for guys just to come together and do stuff together that benefits the community. And the stories of it literally saving lives as people find those reconnections and find a space to talk to each other shoulder to shoulder while they do something
yeah,
is just about giving them life and connectivity again, and has literally saved lives.
I always come back to the fact is I wish we could just remember how to be human. Post-industrial society is a nasty place to live as a human being.
Yeah, yeah, it is. And one important part of being human is creativity. And I know you're rediscovering a new part of your creative soul in this midlife. Why don't you just tell us about that, Ginny?
It's interesting because I never know really where to start with this particular one, but as a child, so, okay, first of all, I'll say I'm dyslexic, right? So I don't know how anyone else reads, but apparently I must have taught myself to read about the age of 7. And I read patterns. I don't read words. I can't read a word I haven't heard. And it happened at a very particular point in time when I suddenly was standing around the teacher's desk and I'm looking at something and I think, oh God, not me. Because I can't read that. I don't know what it says. And someone said something and I immediately related that sound to that shape. And from then on, whatever I did to my brain, it went, oh, that's the answer. So I've always found words fascinating, and stories, because I wanted to read the stories. And I always found stories quite liberating because in my family setup, least said about it, but the stories that I think I survived my childhood with were ones where children didn't need adults and they were still fine. So most of them actually were written by what would have been determined blue stocking Edwardian women who wrote stories where I think they allowed the children in those stories to have the powers they never had. So anyway, from the Railway Children, if you look at the stories in the Railway Children, it's all about what the power the children had to do what they wanted to do, and they escaped everything. Enid Blyton, very similar. So all of those stories were about children surviving the world without adults. And I think that sort of had an impact on me because, as we know now, stories are really important. And I'm like, oh, if I've read all of these, I'm sure I'll be fine. And actually, I managed to escape most of my childhood and either live in stories or go outside and not be at home. So I write now. I mean, I wrote poetry for years and never shared it with anyone. And then someone found a piece of mine and said, this is really good. You should do more of this. Yeah, I've discovered I like to write stories about the worlds I would like to live in and perhaps I don't live in at the moment.
How lovely is that?
Um,
I look
it's,
forward to reading the world that you would like to live in.
well, believe it or not, underlying the whole of that, and because there's 4 of them I've been asked to write, but the first is where humanity tends to be restored to what it should be. And why? And how, and literally why being in a community and celebrating huge diversity is what we're all about.
Yeah, fantastic. That's a really great place to wrap. I've just got one more question for you, Ginny, which is what piece of wisdom would you whisper to Ginny of 10 years ago that would have made a difference?
I don't think 10 years ago was that long ago now. Um, it would probably be, you know, about all the science, right? So when you're worrying about things, why aren't you using the things you know about? Because it took me a while to go, I can fix this stuff. I know how to do it. I don't have to worry for the sake of worrying. I don't have to get stuck because I know the science, for heaven's sake. I know how to rewire my own bloody brain. And I also know what stage my body is going through and what I need to put back into it, for heaven's sake. You know, listen, know that it matters and you know the answers. Actually, I do. You can do it for yourself as well because I go around doing lots of stuff for other people and having that impact. And actually, I can do it for me. I matter too, which has probably been my biggest lesson over the past 10 years is, yeah, I have value just for me, not just what I do for other people.
Now, tell me, how can people find you or get in touch with you?
Crumbs. Okay. Well, if you're interested in changing anything about your behavior or hacking someone else's nervous system, or you just want to know why, then you can find me on LinkedIn. And at the moment, I've got VR Holden because someone told me the algorithms are pushing female names down lower. So I'm trying that for a bit. It might appear again as Ginny or Virginia, so do keep trying. But there is one only me, and you'll know you have found me because my picture looks very much like this. Um, Secondly, you can email me, info@virginiaholden.com. And as long as I'm good enough for me as well, I'll have a website up and moving called The Foundry, because obviously to build your own neurons, you have to go through fire and ice. And that's the with lowercase, Foundry lowercase f, and it's not a letter O, it's a 0 because Foundry'd been taken, obviously. So it's thefoundry.co.uk, and you can find me there. Or get back to Chris, and he knows where to get me.
Yeah, not far away from me in the beautiful West Country.
Oh, I love that. Love being in the West Country.
And in real life, connections are also welcome.
Oh, I'd love to. But yeah, I was going to say, if you appeared at the door, you can always come in for coffee. As long as I'm not on a call like this, I'm very happy to meet. And I much prefer meeting in person, as we've already said, because our brains don't do this on video stuff. They want to see you.
Ginny, that's been beautiful. Thank you for your time and your thoughts and your wisdom and experience. It's been a real joy to listen to you.